Hello everyone, welcome to our Truth Be Told YouTube channel with your hosts Rick Howard and Mike Maney.
Hello everyone, welcome to the end of 2021 and our Truth Be Told YouTube page. Mike Maney up in Missoula, frozen Montana. Rick Howard here in what we consider frozen Modesto, California. We've been having a series of really cold storms for us. I mean, when it's raining here in the valley and it's barely 40 degrees, that's a really cold storm for us.
We pray for 40 degrees.
Normally when the storms come off the Pacific, kind of warms things up a little bit in the winter because the effect of the ocean so close to us. And normally our storms are in the winter it'd be in the 50s or even in the low 60s. But we like this being this cold because that's a good sign that the snow level is low in the Sierra Nevada mountains. In fact, it got down this week to about 1,000 feet elevation. And so at the top of the Sierras over the last 10 days, I think we've had some spots have had over 10 feet of snow. And we have another storm today, so they'll probably get another foot or two. It's kind of a blessing and a curse to all the dozens of huge ski resorts up in Lake Tahoe and all over the Sierra Nevadas, Mammoth and all sorts of places. They love it when the snow falls during the Christmas break because that's like half their business for the whole year. These 2-3 weeks, kids are out of school, people on vacation, and families go up there and ski for several days and spend lots of money, and they love it. The problem is there's been so many storms this time that it scares a lot of people off because a lot of the major highways have been closed, or you may have to sit in stop traffic for several hours. You may have to put on chains. And for the average skier, that's just too much effort. You have to be a real diehard. So there hasn't been much of a break between storms. Usually what they like is a huge storm and then maybe close to a week break before the next big storm. Then you get in some really good days of skiing, but it's even preventing families from just going up playing in the snow or taking their sleds because most kids aren't used to the snow and they don't want to be up there while it's snowing necessarily. They like it for a few minutes and want to get back in the car because it's too cold. And you got to fight the crowds and everything. And so
how about avalanches? Are they concerned about any avalanches?
That's probably going to be a concern now because so much has fallen in such a short time that the places they're aware of, sometimes they're able to get machines in and groom it or set off little charges and kind of take care of it ahead of time instead of waiting for it to build up. But we'll see. I mean, overall, we're very happy because we've been in a drought. The reservoirs are practically empty, and now I think we're already up well over 100% of normal for this time of year. This is pretty early for this much snow and rain to have fallen, and it's all been in the last week and a half.
So you're getting your winter over with.
Well, it's so interesting in California. We need so much water, especially for the huge populations of Southern California, that Southern California would basically be desert. And they depend on us sending a lot of water down there. But it's so odd that with so many people and such water needs, besides the farmers, needing tons of water, that we can just have like a week and a half of some big storms, and it kind of almost makes the whole year. It's amazing how much snow can fall up in those Sierra Nevadas and fill up the reservoirs. And of course, we would never have, even in years we don't have much rain and snow, we really wouldn't have much water problems if we just kept up building reservoirs the last 40 years. But we haven't. The environmentalists kind of won that battle, and so now if we go a couple of years with below normal, rainfall and snow, it becomes a crisis.
Mhm.
But you know, a lot of people are moving out of California, so maybe our water needs won't be as much anymore.
Well, maybe with them moving out, more jobs will be available.
I don't know, but I hardly a few days goes by. Almost every day I hear someone moving out, but
Yeah.
not much time passes to where I hear of, you know, entire family clans moving, like the retired parents, you know, just heard yesterday, uh, elderly parents and several of their kids and grandkids and families and all that are moving back to Texas.
Mm.
You know, kind of like wholesale family groups moving
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And that's been kind of unheard of in the past. Usually it's
Yeah.
just some of the family, but
Well, we know where some of them are going because we picked up a representative here in Montana. So we know where some of them are going. You guys lose a representative and we gain one. So oops.
I think Missoula, you know, people who explore a lot online ahead of time to decide where to move. A lot are moving in northern Idaho,
Mm-hmm.
you know, conservatives.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're wanting to move to a fairly conservative area, but you don't want tons of snow, you know, extremely long winters,
Mm-hmm.
Missoula's kind of a good compromise because
It is.
it's not, you know, it's not like Bozeman or something,
Right.
like brutal winters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although
Bozeman is around 6,000 or so of elevation. We're only 3,200.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that valley where you sit is, you can get a lot of snow around you, but
Yeah.
a lot of times not so much where you live.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been cycling through. I remember years ago, really, really bad winters, lots of snow. But the last few years has been just manageable, we'll put it that way.
Bring on global warming, huh?
Yeah, bring on global warming.
Good
Yeah,
for, good for Missoula, Montana.
yeah. I mean, I remember in years past, downtown streets, the plows would plow a berm right in the middle that would divide in the middle where, you know, traffic is going both ways, right? So now the roads are narrower because this huge berm, and sometimes it might be 4 or 5 feet high. You can't even see, sitting in your car, you can't see over it, the traffic going the other way. So there's been years like that.
Well, you don't remember, it's been a lot of years since that, huh?
Yes. Yeah. And those were the days where we would get a good week or so of 30 below. The Arctic freeze would come down from Canada and it would just turn this place into a frigid zone, and for you know, almost a week of 30 below. But we haven't even seen that in a while.
Yeah, I noticed that your this weekend is going to get down to about 0 where you live.
Yeah.
So that's it's kind of the coldest it gets the last several years.
Yeah. So 0 is just long sleeve weather.
Not jacket yet.
Not jacket.
Not where I live. That would be like a disaster. We think the world would come to an end.
Yeah.
We get only a very few days through the winter where it gets below 32.
Yeah.
And, you know, if it gets below like 25, especially if it stays that way for a few hours, you know, a lot of the kind of plants we have here in the valley, just, it kills them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then you hear in the news that Modesto is shut down.
Yeah, we start wrapping all our pipes and everything when we hear it's going to get much below 32.
Yeah. Yeah. But like I said, across the street, down the street there, they're still building houses. And right now my computer says it's 18 degrees. And these guys are out there with their heavy machinery. I hear hammers pounding.
Wow.
It's just amazing. These guys are tough as nails.
Well, you know, I guess they figure the way things are in California with the politics and people wanting to move, you know, taking advantage of the equity in their homes right now, that they just figure for the next year or two, Missoula is going to receive a lot of California people.
I think so. Yeah.
And so those, whatever they're building, they'll probably, you know, increase the price. They'll accept it for someone to buy it by 10, 20, 30%
Oh, yeah,
for
absolutely. Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
would have before, because Californians are going to come up there with a whole bunch of money. A
Yeah.
lot of them are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Until
it makes it difficult for native people to buy the homes.
it does. Yeah. And that's what happened to Silicon Valley. You know,
Yeah.
the same thing happened to them years ago, decades ago. But yeah, so we'll be praying then for a huge deep freeze winter to kind of filter out the
Lord,
faint of
send
heart.
us a blizzard.
Yes. Oh boy.
Well,
Well, I'm
today
excited.
is what? Today is December the 29th.
Yes,
We've
yes.
just about finished another year. The last 2 years have been,
Oh,
the Lord has been good to us the last 2 years, because I sure see a lot of craziness
I'm telling
in
you.
other people's lives and in
Yeah,
politicians and in businesses and everything. And
yeah, yeah,
we're just trying to, just keep our eyes on the prize and keep our hands on the plow and not looking back, and
that's right. That's right.
seek first the kingdom, and
Yeah,
try to take care of our churches and
yeah, yeah.
preach the word and keep people's focus on the right things.
Well, absolutely. And even our topic today uh, plays into how we should respond. Things are going to get crazy. They're getting crazy. They've been crazy. They're going to get worse. But our God stands in the wings, ready to deliver us, just like He did Israel in Egypt.
Yeah, and
All
that's so Mike's going to take the lead again today on talking about the plagues, and it's a good segue that you just brought up. Um, that verse in Exodus 12:12, against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment.
Mhm.
And so he was picking a fight with their gods one by one, and he's picking them off.
Yes,
And he was eliminating each of their primary gods one at a time.
yes,
And he hardly had to raise a finger, if you think about it. I mean, the plagues were a big deal,
Yeah.
but to God, they were nothing, in the sense that it was so simple for him to just
yes,
take each of their gods one by one.
yes.
And one thing he was showing, and you may get into this in more detail, is that he is a God above and beyond nature. In other words, their gods were part of nature.
Mhm,
Different parts of nature were their gods.
mhm.
And the God of Israel was showing that he is, as the creator, he's the one who put nature into place. And so
Yes.
he is above nature.
Yes.
So he rises above their God so far.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned before and we don't need to get into it in a lot of detail, just in general, the seals and the trumpets and the bowls of wrath in Revelation, in some ways are very similar to the plagues, in that God basically weaponizes nature
Mm-hmm.
against humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Humans were supposed to be stewards over God's creation,
Yes.
taking care of it, and we haven't, in an overall sense. And so in the plagues of Egypt and in the Great Tribulation leading up to Christ's return, it's kind of like God turns nature against humans,
Mm-hmm.
and uses different parts of nature as judgment.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he did to the Egyptians, and that's what he's going to do to the world again.
Mm-hmm. And as Paul said, they worship and serve the creation more than the creator.
Yeah, Romans chapter 1.
Yeah.
And so God gave them over
Mm-hmm.
to their vile passions.
Yes.
It's exactly what we're seeing today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm going to give you all the gods that you want.
well, people talk about America, and you see, like, on Facebook, and not to say that it's wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but people will quote Chronicles, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, and so on and so forth,
Yeah.
I will forgive their land and heal their land and forgive their sins and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that's talking about Israel, not America.
Right.
And and so people think that the solution for America is to turn back to God. But the question often comes up, has America gone too far? And in my mind, we have. Now, what I mean by that is, in the Bible, it seems like when humans despise or reject or pervert any one of God's institutions, that's what really gets him riled up. Because God's institutions are the framework by which he wanted the human race to please him, whether it be the family and marriage, or the nation of Israel, or the church. So he's really jealous over those institutions. And when we start trying to redefine or to eliminate or to work around God's design, and what I'm talking about, have we gone too far? I'm talking about primarily marriage and the family. And I'm talking about primarily three things America has done to violate, to attack, to try to undermine God's divine institution of marriage and family. Number one, legalize abortion, killing of the innocent babies. Number two, redefine marriage, that it can be anyone who loves each other, no matter. And then number three, redefine gender. And God created all of those in the Garden of Eden, with marriage and family operating a particular way in raising up a godly seed, a marriage and a man and a wife. And with those three official steps, I talked some about officialness. Israel had sinned for many generations, and God had punished them in various ways. But when they officially rejected their Messiah as a nation, when Pilate said, "What shall I do with your Messiah?" and they said, "Crucify him." And then when the Jewish leaders said, "We have no king but Caesar." So I call that their official apostasy, where it sealed the deal. And that's kind of what we have done with marriage and family. It's been polluted and perverted and undermined all through history. But in America, what we've done in just our generation is made through abortion, through redefining marriage, through redefining gender. We have made official through legislation, through official decisions of our elected leaders. We have attacked God's divine institution. And I don't know if there's any coming back from that. How do you repent of all that? I guess you could undo all the laws and say it was a mistake and God forgive us, but I don't see our American leaders doing that.
I think because this has been such a slow process of them getting the certain politicians in office at all levels. This has taken decades to do this, and so it would take decades to reverse it. But that would mean that conservative politicians would have to then fill in these spots and win all their elections at the local, state, and federal levels. And so I personally don't see this as happening. I think you're right. I think we've crossed a threshold of no return. And because I believe in the premillennial point of view, I see this as all part of the foretold plan that even Jesus said, when the Son of Man returns, will he find the faith on the earth? And so a lot of things will have eroded society, and this is a huge one. What you're talking about, this is huge. I don't see us going backwards. I don't
either.
And conservative.
The big problem with American Christians is we try to look at the Bible with American eyes, America centric.
Yes.
And the Bible is Jerusalem centric.
Yes, it is.
It's
yes.
Israel centric. It's
Yes.
Middle East centric.
Yeah.
Not America centric.
No.
So the number one questions people who specialize in prophecy and the end times get asked is, where is America? What about American prophecy?
Yeah.
That's their big concern.
Yeah.
And yet,
Yeah.
in some way, America has to be neutralized or neutered in some way to not defend Israel when the 10-nation confederation rises up against them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think people say, well, what's going to happen to America in order to put us on the sidelines? Or is Russia or China going to attack us? Is some big catastrophe going to happen? But what may simply happen is because we have so perverted God's divine institution of family and marriage, he may just judge us in some way, and our inability to play a power role in stopping what's going to happen to Israel may come more from God than from another nation.
Yeah. Yeah. And coming from him as a result of ourselves putting ourselves on the sidelines. So we've just disqualified ourselves from being effective as a world player. And we've seen this happen. Just a couple of elections ago, the erosion really began to pick up speed. So
all we're really seeing in the large picture is that at particular times, God steps in with a strong hand of judgment.
Yes.
And because sentence against an evil work, doesn't happen immediately. It's set in the hearts of man to do evil. And Pharaoh in Egypt, by all appearances, as we said when Moses first came and said, our God says, let my people go. And Pharaoh's looking at him like, you got to be crazy.
Yeah, right.
Look, my gods are the ones in control. Your people under your God are slaves.
Right.
And there's nothing that would indicate that things are going to change.
Right.
So by all appearances, Moses was bringing a crazy message that was impossible.
Yeah.
And therefore Pharaoh naturally refused because he had all the marbles, it looked like.
He had all the marbles, and if it weren't for God protecting them, they could have just arrested Moses and Aaron right on the spot.
Yes, they could have.
But they believed in God. They believed in what God was about to do.
So even though Moses and Aaron and especially Pharaoh, probably did not, even Moses and Aaron may have not recognized the providential hand of God in protecting them in the beginning.
Yeah.
Why didn't Pharaoh just raise his staff and all of a sudden they're surrounded by spears and swords, cutting their head off and throwing them in prison or something?
Yeah.
And he had the power to do that, except the providential hand of God was preventing it.
Yeah. And like you said, they may not have had a clear picture, a clear path as to where this was going, but God did give him a little indication at the burning bush. And the miracle there. And all of that. And then reinforced God's seriousness of this with Zipporah. And him chasing down Moses to kill him, so he just kind of, I think all that together helped give Moses enough picture that this was divine. And so
there's a kind of a similarity, Moses and Aaron in Israel and the plagues and coming out of Egypt and going through the wilderness, a little bit to the early church. The early disciples during the ministry of Christ were in the dark a lot, weren't they?
Yes.
As far as understanding. It was coming a little bit at a time. Picture was becoming clearer. But it wasn't until not even just the resurrection, but the ascension and the day of Pentecost settled it.
Yeah.
And then from then on, they were firm and it was clear. And it's kind of the same way with Moses and Aaron in Israel. Now they still sinned after that, and they sinned during it, but it kind of took a combination of the plagues, the death of the firstborn, the Red Sea crossing, and then the events at Mount Sinai. at least for Moses, I think it really settled in Moses and in some of the others through those big events, like it did the early church. But anyway, I need to turn it over to you because you started us into the plagues last time, and you're going to continue to do that today.
Well, maybe just as a reminder from our last session, which, by the way, for our viewers' sake, we're still looking to address some volume issues of that last session. So we'll get that.
What are we today? We're in session 41.
41.
Yeah, so we're starting the second set of 40 sessions. The first 40 was a number of testing and trial for us. And we're still learning.
Yes.
So we're glad that those who tune into our videos are patient with us.
Yes.
So today is December the 29th, 2021, and session number 41. So go ahead, Mike.
All right. And just as a reminder, we look at why God would even choose to intervene in this huge way, that he's a God that keeps covenant and promises, that he holds to his integrity. And that's one thing that separates our God from all other false gods, is he is a God of integrity. And he cannot lie, and he cannot deny himself. And so he promised Abraham and the seed of Abraham that he would deliver his people from Egypt. And he foretold this with Abraham. And so a long time had expired, but now this is the time for him to do that. So he is keeping his promise. And that's important for us to realize, because as you and I were talking off camera beforehand, things are going to grow worse here in America and the whole world. And they're going to get crazier than they are now. And so just like God was hoping that Moses, Aaron, and Israel would finally arrive at that faith, that trust in him, that we'll have to exercise the same faith and trust in our God to deliver us from what's coming. Of course, you'll tie all of this in with the plagues in Revelation here after a few sessions. But for right now, we're looking at their predicament and God's promise to deliver them. So last time we did look at the first strike. I like to use the word strike.
I like that word. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
plague, or even miracle or sign, which all those are correct, but strike is a more confrontational word. Isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I think because now we're seeing Yahweh in terms of a general moving in to defeat an enemy, and with a strategy in mind. He's got this all mapped out in his mind from plague 1 to plague 10, how he's going to do this. He knew his targets. If you're going to be successful in striking your enemy, you have to strike their key targets. And we saw that in the first Gulf War. We went in there with our missiles, our computer-guided missiles, and they were very precise strikes to minimize what they call collateral damage. It wasn't the citizenry as much as it was their military that we were after. And so God is after maybe not so much the Egyptian citizenry as much as the Egyptian leadership, because it was Pharaoh that was the one confronting Moses and defying
he was one of the gods that God was going to execute judgment against.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I like the word strike because it kind of creates the idea of this is general to general, Yahweh and Moses and Pharaoh. Okay. And all of his strategy against a very evil nation that held his people prisoner. And so he was going to release his prisoners from their situation as he promised. And so he's doing this, of course, in piecemeal fashion. It could have been just one big strike and game over. But then that's the record we would have then for all these thousands of years. It was just, there was no, say, drama or buildup. It was just over in one big flash. But he did this in a systematic, I think, very dramatic way to really make a greater impact as to his power over, and you said this earlier, over every facet of their life and over nature that they worshiped.
Yeah, and part of the reason for step-by-step process, not just is to pick a distinct God each time to show that he had power over that particular God, which would lessen that to a degree if you're doing it all at once.
Yeah.
That's what he's going to do again in the tribulation, isn't it? There are 7 seals and 7 trumpets and 7 bowls. You know, it's like progressively wearing down the human race. And like with Egypt and Pharaoh, during the Great Tribulation, a few times it speaks about, yet even then, the men did not repent of their sins.
Yes.
So, you know, at each step of these plagues, it's like Pharaoh and Egypt are like in awe of Israel's God, and then he stops the plague, and then they harden their heart again, and they kind of reinforce their control over the Israelites, and they defy the God. So then the next next strike comes, and so it's just a kind of an interesting process he uses. Of course, the end goal for the strikes, for the plagues, and during the Great Tribulation is the same, isn't it?
Yes,
and he says this in Exodus, and he says it a lot in Ezekiel, like 36 through 39, which is talking about the time of the Great Tribulation. A repetitive phrase is used over and over, especially in Ezekiel, but even here in Exodus. The end goal is the same, that you may know that I am the Lord.
Yes.
To prove who the true God is.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And one thing I want to point out is that God is, because of his integrity, he's going to exact the same principles on his own people as his enemies. And so he's going to, the whole purpose is for them to repent and acknowledge that he is the one true God, like you said. And so he used these same principles of chastening even on his own people, punishing them through their land, through plagues, through drought, or sometimes even through the sword, through their enemies, to get them to swing back and be loyal to him once again. And so what he's doing here with Egypt, he would also do so in the future with Israel several times. I believe it's Nehemiah chapter 9 that points out this cycle of repentance and chastening and repentance and chastening. And yet God will keep his promise and preserve a people out of this whole nation. But right now he's got to get them out of jail.
Well, why don't you take us through the various plagues and some insight you have on each of them?
All right, I'll just I'll do a little bit of reading here from my notes. Of course, last time we did look at the first plague. The first plague, I think, was the heart and soul of Egypt. That's the Nile River. So he already showed his power by striking a very main artery in this nation, that they relied upon the Nile River for everything. And so, of course, they worshipped the Nile River to the nth degree. And they had a number of gods associated with the Nile River. And I won't go through all of them, but Num and Happy and Osiris, Tauret, and Nu, N-U, what I have here, all were associated with the Nile. And so to strike fear in your enemy, you go at the very heart right away. And that's what he did. Okay? These other gods, or these other situations with the soil and the air and all that, he'll get to those. But his first strike was upon the very heart and soul of the nation. That was the Nile River. It ran from top to bottom all throughout the country. The second plague was frogs. Well, frogs came out of the Nile River. And so a lot of these are associated with the Nile one way or the other. And
why do you think frogs? I mean, thinking about all the different plagues, and most of the plagues are painful or they cause death. And, but what harm do frogs bring other than just being irritating? Frogs everywhere. That'd be a nightmare in itself. But they don't bite you. They don't bring disease. I don't think I don't know that they destroy your food. All the other plagues seem like they were more harmful.
Yeah.
Frogs are just kind of a nuisance or
A
something.
nuisance, yeah, and they're croaking and all that. And yeah,
there's got to be something I'm missing as to why frogs, other than, it was connected with a particular god,
yeah,
because there were so many frogs in the Nile River, and
Yeah.
frogs do serve a purpose in bodies of water. They, the whole cycle of life of insects and creatures, and some creatures eat the frogs and frogs eat other things, and you need all of that for the proper balance. So
mhm.
I'm sure there's a lot more there than I realized, but frogs just seems like it's a kind of a different kind of it's like God is ratcheting up with frog. Okay, you think, okay, frogs are like, you hate your house to be full of frogs, your bed to be full of frogs, and food to be full of frogs.
Mhm.
But it's not going to kill you necessarily. It's
Right.
not going to bring about disease necessarily. Maybe it
Yeah.
did some way, but then as he moves on to the other plagues, boy, they become painful and they cause
Mhm.
death and all sorts of just terrible things beyond
Yeah.
what you think of frogs.
Yeah. So what I have here in my notes is that somehow they worship the frog because of its ability to reproduce.
Hmm.
And so
Symbol of reproduction.
yeah,
Okay, that
And
makes
so
sense.
so I have here that amulets and scarabs were worn by Egyptian women to protect them during childbirth. So again, we're moving into superstition, the dark side of religion. So anything they held as sacred and was an affront to the true creator. And so they began to worship the creation more than the creator, just like Paul said.
Mhm.
And so he's
And
going to
frogs,
attack.
wouldn't frogs have more to do with a society who esteems frogs because they esteem some idea of um, uh, what am I trying to think of? Like evolution, like the whole idea of the tadpole turn into the frog and all that, that if they apply that same principle to humans, then they're not looking at their gods as creators
Right.
necessarily, but they look at humans as kind of a process of evolution like the frogs.
Mm-hmm.
There may be something to it about the Egyptian society and their, even though they had many gods, we would call them in essence atheists.
Right.
Certainly about the true God and about the idea of God creating humans rather than them just coming about through natural methods.
Yeah. As a kid, those wash tubs, those metal wash tubs with the handles on the side.
Oh yeah.
When it would rain, it would flood these. We had dirt roads where I lived as a kid, and the rains would come down and create pockets, pools of water. Well, next thing you know, there's these little pollywogs are all throughout these little puddles of water. So we would collect these.
Oh yeah, we did too.
Yeah, and we'd fill up this wash tub full of water, and of course, over the weeks, we'd watch them develop into tadpoles, lose their tails and into little froggies. And so that was just fascinating to us. I don't recall us worshiping them, but I do remember it was just intriguing to see the process. And so I think you may have hit upon something here.
Yeah, I
Maybe
think there's something there that speaks about their view of God as creator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But they were second in line to be taken down and to be on display as you said, God is above even this process. I mean, he controls it because he, of course, created it. And the third one, again, back to the Nile, the fertile soil of the Nile. And so the third one is lice, Seb or Geb, Geb, Seb or Geb, was considered the father of gods. The black fertile soil, the basin was called Kemi, and it was sacred because of what it could produce. And of course, to you and I, this all seems ridiculous. Why not just worship the one God? But their culture was dark, and so quite naturally, even in our more sophisticated culture, thousands of years removed from this darkness, we still worship the Creator or the creation more than the Creator. And so I can see where this would develop, because we're at the tail end of this early development. So the third plague was against the Nile's soil. But one interesting note that I found in my research was that these lice that it produced affected the Egyptian priests, and the Egyptian priests had to shave themselves so that they wouldn't be infected with lice, because then they would become impure. And so it seems as though, according to that theory, that God was interrupting the priests' ability to worship their gods and to serve their gods. So in essence, if that's true, then he was also attacking the priesthood of Egypt. And then we have flies coming in the fourth plague. Shoe, which makes sense because of the shoe fly. Don't bother me. I thought I'd just throw that one in there. And Shu was the son of Ra, which was the sun god. So anything and everything that they venerated as a deity, God just says, look, I'm just going to take him down. He or she, I'm just going to take him down and show you that I'm above all of this. And of course, we're leading up to the 10th plague, which you and I talked about, that we'll treat as a separate session, because it's so impactful. And of course, like you said, introduces the Passover. So Shu, I have here, was also the god of the cool air, the upper sky, the creator of the wind, held up the firmament and kept it separated from the earth. And so all these attributes they ascribed to all these different gods is what God was attacking. Isis was also the queen of heaven, or queen of the atmosphere. And so I have also here, do you have in your notes that King James has flies in italics, the word Arab, which might point more to a swarm. And if it's just alluding to a swarm, then it wouldn't be limited necessarily to flies. Some commentators think it could be the scarab beetle, just the beetles or other insects that traveled in swarms.
Yeah, flies are in italics all the way through this fourth plague.
Yeah.
It is interesting during this plague, he makes that famous statement that you've brought up before in verse 23 of chapter 8, Exodus. I will make a difference between my people and your people. That was part of the purpose of these strikes.
Yes.
Was to show the difference between Egypt and Israel.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
And
I see that as a twofold. And we talked about the twofold part, I think last time, that on the one hand, he's showing the Egyptians his power and his unlimited ability to render their gods ineffective against his power. But at the same time, he also wants his own people to believe him, which there've been such a distance between him and them for all these years, to reacquaint himself, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to reintroduce himself and his influence in history with now this generation of people. So it was important for them to see, hey, he's making there's a difference between us and them, so this is interesting how he's protecting us and harming them. So I think they needed to see that side of their God, because he's going to bring them into this covenant, remind them of a covenant. But they needed to kind of get on board with his uniqueness over their host country and they're a slew of gods. But they need to begin to build this confidence in Yahweh also. So I think that's one of the reasons why he began to separate the two groups out. So, get any more thoughts on that?
No, I like that. I think you said it quite well.
And then fifth plague, livestock. Apis, Ta, the bull god, made animated through Ta, apparently the bull god and the living image of the god Ta, P-T-A-H. Supposedly Apis, the bull, supposedly had the power of prophecy. And so I have here in my notes that when Apis bull died, the land of Egypt mourned for him as they would for the loss of the monarch himself. And so it just seems like when you get into false religion and you yourself are ascribing these qualities and powers, you're writing the script. You can give them whatever power your imagination calls for. And so this is just one form of just superstition and spiritual darkness.
I do notice here in chapter 9, verse 4 about that plague of the livestock.
Mhm.
The Lord will make a difference between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt, so nothing shall die of all that belongs to the children of Israel. So even among the livestock, he's making a difference.
Absolutely, because those
Really throwing a
livestock,
line.
yeah, those livestock God had in mind to use for sacrifices. And so they, in a sense, would be holy unto him. And so he would not permit all of theirs to be killed. They would need animals to sacrifice there and over on the other side in Midian. So he wanted to make sure they had a good handful of livestock.
Yeah, of course, what did they do? They built a golden calf, didn't they?
Well, that wasn't enough. So it reverted right back. They backslid, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Thanks, Aaron. So that's Apis.
Now the next one's pretty tough.
Boils. So now he's getting up close and personal. Now he's not only affecting their belongings, but now he's affecting their persons. And we all know that it takes different forms of chastening for people to repent. I know you've noticed that. Some seem to repent when they lose their job. In other words, things around them, or their homes. Others only when they themselves are affected, when it becomes maybe a disease for themselves or a loved one. Okay, there's usually something that breaks the bank, something that causes them to fall on their knees. Okay, fear of a loss of their liberty, facing prison. So there's a lot of different things that can cause this. So far, none of this has worked. So all their possessions and belongings, it hasn't broken Pharaoh. It hasn't broken the people. And so now he's attacking them physically with a disease, with boils. And so he's just hitting them from every, he's like Mike Tyson. He's hitting him with jabs, with overhand rights, with uppercuts, with you name it. He's just going at him full force. So that's those are the boils, and it affected the men and their livestock.
I like what verse 11 says. The magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils were on the magicians and on all the Egyptians.
Yes. So now it's a point of embarrassment. He's humiliating them. So their religion and their power and their authority is now being undercut by the one God, the one true God. So now he's beginning to humiliate and undercut the power that the people and the confidence that the people had in these people. And Jesus tried to do the same thing with the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
Mm-hmm.
He tried to undercut their authority and their clout with the common people. And of course, he he would do this as they would attack him. They would ask him questions, trying to embarrass him and humiliate him. And he'd turn right around and, in effect, embarrass them. And that just made them all the more mad to, of course, plot his death. But so now the seventh plague is the hail-fire combination. And I have here in my notes that Seth was their storm god, the god of thunder and lightning and such. So God then sent thunder and lightning. And so he's going to attack all of the power that there was attributed to Seth. He's going to go after Seth now. So Seth is now on his radar to attack his powers. So he controls his power over the atmospheric conditions.
I thought about this plague the other day because in these series of storms that we've had, pretty cold.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed a couple of days ago in the afternoon, it was like little patches of blue sky, but then really dark storm clouds.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you've learned from experience, that's when possible hail can happen, lightning and thunder. Usually a rainbow follows that or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of watching the sky a little bit extra close. And sitting here in my office, I can look out on my driveway in the street. And all of a sudden it started hailing. We don't get much of that here. And it's real small pebbles,
Mm-hmm.
but it was really heavy for us. It
Mhm.
wasn't just mixed in with the rain, it was total hail.
Mm-hmm.
And it coming down really hard, really thick. I mean, it covered, solid, it covered the ground.
Mhm.
It went for like 5 straight minutes. When it's hailing that hard, that seems like a long time.
Yes.
I went out and walked in it a little bit and everything is
Mhm.
bouncing off of me,
Mhm.
because pellets were real small.
Mm-hmm.
But you read of other places where the pellets are larger, size of a marble or even larger, size sometimes of a baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear about windshields breaking and of course what it does to crops.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll just flatten the crops of any type, especially ground crops.
I watched a video where there were some hailstorms, and it was one where it was just kind of a collection, kind of a collage of videos, I think, that people had sent in or something. So this guy made this video, and people sitting in their cars and trying to wait out the storm, and these golf ball size, if not larger, hailstones are pummeling their cars, and next thing you know, the windshield is breaking. That's pretty scary, because that could kill you.
Yes, it could.
And when you get to your part in Revelation, you're going to be talking about some hailstones that are pretty serious.
One interesting thing about this plague that is often overlooked, and it shows the mercy of God even toward the Egyptians, where God tells Moses to tell Pharaoh and to tell the Egyptians in verse 19, therefore send now and gather your livestock and all that you have in the field, for the hail shall come down on every man and on every beast which is found in the field and is not brought home, and they shall die.
Mm-hmm.
He who feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh made his servants and his livestock flee to the houses. But he who did not regard the word of the Lord left his servants and his livestock in the field. And we know this is talking about the Egyptians, because down in verse 26, only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, there was no hail. So he's extending mercy to the average Egyptian of, even though I'm bringing these plagues against you and against your gods and Pharaoh, I'm still extending a hand of mercy to you if you will acknowledge that I am the true God and you can become part of my people.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this was part of what later is called the mixed multitude that came out of Egypt, that there were some who recognized that their God was the true God, the God of Israel, and they wanted to connect themselves with Israel. Maybe some of them were completely converted. Maybe some of them weren't quite, and they caused problems later out in the wilderness. But this is kind of maybe the beginning description of what that mixed multitude was.
Yeah, and perhaps they would, of course, have had to put blood on the lintels and the doorposts.
Yeah.
And so so you're right.
So evidently some of them were becoming a little bit like Rahab in Jericho,
Mhm.
that the evidence was proving itself to them.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And like Nineveh.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have examples of God not willing that any should perish, that all should come to repentance. And so yeah, you're right. That's a great point. That even in these strikes, he's merciful upon those who might respond to this. But he had to show this difference. He had to show this clear difference, that he could protect his own people in the midst of striking their enemies all around them. And so he had that capability, that power. So once he clears that path and shows that power, that uniqueness, then it's just left up to others to either believe it or not believe it.
But it is interesting that it was important for God to show even the Egyptians, I'm not just a God of wrath and judgment. I'm a God of mercy.
Yes.
And I'm giving you fair warning, and you can spare your servants and your cattle and your crops, or whatever, if you heed my warning.
Well, think about it. So you got an Egyptian. His livestock is still alive because he went out in the field and brought him in. His next door neighbor didn't. So his next door neighbors, all of his livestock are dead. He goes, "Why are you still up?" Because I went out. I believed in what was going to happen, and therefore mine are still alive. And so you don't know where that could have gone, but I like that.
That's laying kind of down a principle of
yes,
I'm not just protecting my people Israel, I'm extending mercy to sinners.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's part of the integrity of God that we're talking about. He's completely fair. The ninth plague, of course, was darkness.
No, you missed the eighth.
Oh, I missed the eighth. I'm sorry, I skipped down here. Eighth, Khafre, the Egyptian beetle. And the Egyptian beetle was a huge I'm sorry, locusts. Okay, I have here in my notes the Egyptian beetle goddess, the locust eating all the trees as well as all the residue from the hail. I also have here that locusts were not common in Egypt because the Red Sea formed a natural barrier prohibiting them from migrating to Egypt over from Arabia. Yeah. So if that's true, then like the other plagues that were specifically targeted against certain people and were called on by Moses at will, they were not just natural phenomena that just happened to be there or show up. And so as I know a lot of skeptics believe,
finished off what the hail hadn't destroyed, huh?
Yeah. So complete annihilation.
So the hail's bad enough, but once the locust came through, your thoughts start turning to starvation. Yeah. So it's getting real desperate here.
It's getting desperate, absolutely. And he's moving toward the 10th one, but the 9th one is darkness. And so now we're touching upon a very important god in their economies, Ra, the sole creator, the sun god.
Yeah, he's saving Ra, and Pharaoh is God for the last two, isn't
Yes.
he? Yeah, the two biggies.
I like your word used it earlier, ratcheting up. So he's ratcheting up.
Yeah.
Okay. And I remember some boxers toward the end of a round, Sugar Ray Leonard was good for this. Toward the end of the round, you would what we call pepper your opponent. It's just a flurry of fists left and right, just for the last maybe 10 seconds or 15 seconds. You would just punish him with a flurry of fists. And so God is ratcheting up, taking out, or will take out, the big God. Here's the second in command, Ra, as it were. I have here that he was manifested in different forms. He could appear as a crowned man, a falcon, or a man with a falcon's head, or as, what else? As a scarab, a beetle, pushing the sun across the sky. And so Ra was huge for them. I also have kind of associated with Ra, the sun would be Thoth, their moon god. And so, of course, if you wipe out the power of the sun, the moon defaults quite naturally. And so he was
Another thing about this darkness, the order of these plagues are important.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the hail that almost destroys all your food source,
Mm-hmm.
and the locusts finish the job. So what happens when God sends the wind and the locusts are gone? The first order of business would be to get out and plant new crops as quick as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But then 3 days of darkness, they didn't know it'd be over in 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
For all they knew, it could last longer.
Yeah.
And so how do you go out and plant new crops when it's dark? But even more than that, mentally or psychologically, how can you go out and plant new crops? They're not going to grow without sun.
Right.
So, this idea of long-term food source starvation problems is really setting in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what God has them in this order. And that's what God intended is this is not just against nature, against the natural world being turned against them,
Mm-hmm.
but it's deeply psychological. It's like our entire existence is in real danger right now.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to all starve to death.
Yeah.
And of
Yeah.
course, they still have this memory that probably they had written books and told stories how that Egypt had saved the world,
Mhm.
during the time of Joseph,
Mm-hmm.
that the whole world came to Egypt for food, and that Egypt was always known as the breadbasket of that part of the world. Even later in the Roman Empire,
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons they conquered Egypt and northern Africa was to grow wheat and other crops,
Mhm.
to feed their soldiers and to feed their people needing food. It's just an abundant source of important crops for that time. And so you have the hail and then the locust and then the darkness, and it's basically the God of heaven saying, I can completely cut off any hint of you being able to provide your own food, and you're just going to slowly starve to death, and you can't do anything about it.
Right.
I mean, complete control at this point.
Yeah.
Your future.
Yeah. And
So
fast forward.
psychologically, they would be in really poor shape psychologically.
No hope.
Yeah.
He's wiping out their hope. And even in our day, as the supply lines begin to dwindle, and it affects our own food chain, it'll be a time where people can begin to wake up and smell the coffee.
Yeah, there's already, kind of feelings of panic setting in certain
Mhm.
places.
Yes.
I mean, even something as silly as like, this last Christmas, show you how out of it I am. I can't even think of the name now, but there's a particular game system that's real popular right now, video game system.
Hmm. I can't think of
And
it.
my son-in-law, Vince, bought it for his kids a few months ago. He planned ahead. And I read an article just the other day, how many homes in America had a miserable Christmas because the kids only wanted one thing more than any other thing put together, is this particular game system. And how many fathers waited till the last few weeks before Christmas to go try to buy it online and stores. And one man was desperate. He went to 8 or 10 stores in one day, and they're all out. And to have to face your kids as a father letting them know I could not supply to you the one thing you wanted,
Yeah.
And there's been shortages in different toys like that through the years, and there's panic buying and all that kind of stuff. But I think what happened in Egypt is the same thing that's going to happen during the Great Tribulation. It's what is that one plague from God? And they say, "Harm not the oil and the wine."
Yeah.
But there's the basic wheat and barley or whatever, the crops for daily food.
Yeah.
You can't even afford it. There's going to be a shortage. And one thing that might mean, harm not the oil and the wine. There's several things it might mean. One thing it might mean is that the rich, the super rich, will always have whatever they want, represented by oil and wine.
Mhm.
But the average person's daily food, represented by the wheat and barley or whatever it is there in Revelation, is going to be scarce and it's going to be expensive. So there's going to be mass panic for food, for daily provisions. And, even during what we're going through now with COVID, it's pretty obvious to me whenever I go to the supermarket, that they try to do a good job of covering up the bare spaces on the shelves with other products, or they space them out. They only put canned goods, 1 or 2 deep instead of 6 deep or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But even then, you still see blank spaces and shortages and things, and it hasn't really harmed us that much. We have plenty of options, but
Our Walmart's like that.
it doesn't have to increase a whole lot for panic to start setting in, and people start hoarding and panic buying and all that kind of thing. And it seems to be what the Bible describes is coming our way.
Yes.
And part of their purpose for the mark of the beast is to gain control of like panic buying and hoarding and all that, to where they're not just that you can't buy or sell, but they probably will also limit the amount you can buy and sell, so that there's plenty for everyone or whatever.
Yeah.
And we can see it headed that way. It's already
absolutely
already headed that way.
It's already headed. And then with crypto and that whole system that they'll usher in, they'll track everything you buy and where you buy it from. And so it's just amazing how 1984 is upon us.
We're going backwards, aren't we? Technology is pushing us forward,
Yeah.
and yet it's also taking us backward at the same time.
Yes.
Let me close. Do you have something you want to summarize? Because I know we're leaving the.
No, we got her down, Darkness. So he's setting up for the final one, of course, and we'll, as we said, we'll treat that in a separate session. But
well, thank you, Mike, for taking us through those. It was interesting. And let me close. There's we've talked before about these summary chapters that are scattered through the Bible. One particular one summarizes the plagues. It's Psalm 105, and I'll just read about less than 10 verses here or so. But it says in verse 23 of Psalm 105, Israel also came into Egypt. Jacob sojourned in the land of Ham. And he, meaning God, increased his people greatly, made them stronger than their enemies. He turned their heart to hate his people, to deal craftily with his servants. He sent Moses, his servant, and Aaron, whom he had chosen. They performed his signs among them and wonders in the land of Ham. He sent darkness. So he's not going in order. He's actually starting with plague number 9. He sent darkness and made it dark, and they did not rebel against his word. He turned their waters into blood, killed their fish, and that would be, we didn't really talk about that too much, but the fish, not only would dead fish stink terribly,
yes,
but then that was their source of food also. So their source of food from the water, and then with the hail and the locust, their source of food from the land. Their land abounded with frogs, even in the chambers of their kings. He spoke, and there came swarms of flies and lice in all their territory. He gave them hail for rain and flaming fire in their land. He struck their vine trees also, and their fig trees, splintered the trees of their territory. He spoke, and locusts came, young locusts without number, and ate up all the vegetation in their land. and devoured the fruit of their ground. He also destroyed all the firstborn in their land, the first of all their strength. And that's where we're headed next.
Yes.
So it doesn't even mention all 10 here, and not even in order. He's just kind of summarizing it. But, this is written hundreds of years later, and yet it was still an important topic
Yes.
for the children of Israel. And when we go through the 10th plague and the Passover, and God wanting them to observe the Passover every year, part of the purpose was to remember what God had done for them in Egypt, and what God does against those who try to destroy his people.
Yes. He did not want this event to be easily forgotten.
No.
Just like the Jews were saying never again, or don't forget, as far as the Holocaust goes, God wanted that same an impact to resonate through every generation after.
Yes.
So, well, I'm excited about next week. We'll pick up.
Yes. Why don't we bring this to a close? Well, we wish everyone a happy New Year, and hope that I don't know what to expect. As the old song we used to sing, I don't know about tomorrow, but I know who holds tomorrow.
That's
and
right.
I know who holds my hand.
That's right. Yes.
That's how we enter the new years,
Yeah.
trusting in the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed this session. I'm looking forward to next week's.
Yes, Mike.
In the meanwhile, I hope, well, let's see. It'll be the new year by this time next week, right?
As we used to chuckle as kids when we got out for 2 weeks Christmas vacation, would say to all of our friends, see you next year.
It still holds true, doesn't it?
I still say it and giggle.
I still say it. There's a little kid in all of us, brother.
Oh, yes. Yes, there is.
All right. Well, Lord bless you.
Yeah, Lord bless you, everybody.
Yes.